Hey, y'all. Welcome and thank you for joining me for another All Hands on Tech Live developer stream with your host, David Neal, or sometimes known as Reverent Geek. If you want to find me on Twitter or Instagram or my website, I'm Reverent Geek everywhere. Thanks again for joining. And we are in the process of building a teleprompter desktop app that will run on Mac OS, Windows, Linux, and give you the ability to overlay a script on top of whatever conferencing or presentation software or um, whatever your choice of of app that you like to use. As I've described in the previous streams, the goal is to um, build an application that will give a script that's part of a teleprompter screen. And I'll show you what mine looks like. I've got an iPad sitting up here with that mirrors my display on my laptop so that I can see. Um, I can talk directly at the camera while I am presenting or interviewing or giving a presentation um, or doing a live stream like this. I can look uh, directly into the camera and be able to use this app to display a script of, say, talking points or interview questions or things that I want to prompt myself for as I'm maybe creating a tutorial, so that I don't have to continue to look off camera or look down at notes or something like that. So we've made some pretty good progress so far. We've got a proof of concept in place. It does um, a lot of what we need the app to do. There's just a lot of uh, you know nice to have features and finishes to put on the app as we go along. So to recap where we are right now, I'll share my screen, and you can see um, what we finished doing on the last stream was loading an external file that contains the script for the content, with the goal in mind of eventually um, allowing people who use the application uh, to not have to edit code or do anything as complicated as that, but to use it like a real application, be able to open a text file, or in my case, I want to support Markdown as the way of describing um, a script. I'm a fan of the Markdown syntax, and I use it for lots of things like blog posts and creating content for um, the work that I do. And so we've got in this Electron application, we're using Electron with Node.js, which is, in a nutshell, Node.js and Chrome packaged in a way that to a user, they would never know that it's a web application or based on web technologies. To give you an example, if you use the Slack desktop client or Visual Studio Code, GitHub Desktop, and many other apps, those are built using Electron. And if you come from a web development world, man, it is an exciting stack of technology. It allows you to build cross-platform desktop apps. And yeah, it's got maybe a tainted um, history with performance and resource usage, but over the years it's gotten better and better. If you use Visual Studio Code, you know that hey, it can do some amazing things and not be too much of a resource hog. Okay, so in our last session, we created a preload script for the main app, and it reads in the contents of a file. We called it content.html, and it updates the front end of the application, the HTML that is we're seeing with the contents of that file. So just to make sure everything is still working as we last left it, I'm going to come to here and run npm start, which is launches Electron. And as you can see, hopefully you can see an overlay of the text that's in that content.html. So I will hide the other window so the contrast is a little bit higher for the stream. But you can see prompt 1, talking point 1, 2, and 3. And if we go look at the source code, that's exactly what we have inside our content.html. So we're already at a point that if you're comfortable, um, you know, editing code and doing all that kind of stuff, you could make a somewhat simplified teleprompter. But there's at least several things that I know we want to add on to this application. One is, maybe some a keyboard stroke hotkeys, or the ability to use a clicker, like if you're giving a presentation and you want to click through your script so that you go from one talking point to another, or one block of text to another, so that you don't have to reach and hit a keyboard or something like that. There's even foot switch controllers that you can get that act like a clicker, where you can move from one block of or one slide to the next, right? And those are cool. I think I'll get one of those someday, or maybe I'll build one. I've seen folks who have created their own foot switch devices using IoT. That may be a really cool project to work on. The other thing that I want to do is I want to, instead of editing raw HTML, is I want to use Markdown instead, and that is a much easier syntax to work with. And maybe someday, if we continue to do these streams together, we'll add a editor directly in the application so that you can edit the script inside the app instead of having to create the script outside of the app and open it inside the app. So today, I think we'll tackle that first step of instead of using HTML, we'll create some code to support Markdown syntax. So we'll be able to read a Markdown file, convert that file to HTML, and then put the contents of that file into the app as the script. I'm going to go back to the application and close that. So I'm going to create a new file here and call it content.md for Markdown. And I'm going to add a Markdown syntax, teleprompter script, version 1, talking point 1, idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, point 2, and call it like question 1, question 2. So this is Markdown syntax. The pound symbols are used to denote like headings. So 1 gets converted to an H1 tag, 2 pounds get converted to an H2 tag, and so forth. Bullet points are just using asterisks or dashes. You can also use indentions, and any random block of text becomes a paragraph tag. It's a really lovely syntax for creating content that will get converted into HTML. Now, if you do have any questions at any point along the way, pop those into the comments and I will try to answer those as they come in. This is designed to be an interactive session. So if you have questions about what I'm doing, how I make the decisions that I make, or anything along the way, ask me anything. So we've got our Markdown file, and we want to load that file. Let's say we'll change this .html to Markdown. So this function, all it does is get the text. It just reads a text file and returns the contents of that text file. So the only thing to change there for now is the name of the file that we're going to read. Here is where we need to make some changes, because we're no longer getting straight HTML, we're getting Markdown. So we need to read the Markdown from the text file, and then we need to convert the Markdown to HTML. So we're going to create some kind of function or use a library that can do that work for us. So HTML equals, I don't know yet if it's an async function or not, but we'll say await convert Markdown to HTML and pass in the contents of the Markdown file. So we'll create a new blank function here with that name that takes in the Markdown content, return something. Now, if we were doing test-driven development, which is really awesome, I highly recommend, having that kind of discipline in your development stack. I'm not going to be writing tests as part of this series of live streams, but we may get there someday. Maybe we want to explore refactoring an existing code base to use, to create some tests around these things. But for now, we're just going to scaffold the app and kind of build it on the fly as this is a collaborative effort. So if you see me make a mistake, you can be my test harness, right? You can write a comment in and say, hey, you didn't supply the right arguments there, or you didn't name that correctly. Now, hopefully my ESLint will catch a lot of common mistakes. So for converting Markdown, we're going to use a library that I've used in the past called Showdown. So now maybe I'll walk through that process first. If you're building anything with Node.js or anything JavaScript related, really, you can go to npmjs.com and search for existing libraries, packages that are available for Node.js and JavaScript. And of course, you see popular libraries listed there like Lodash and React, TS Live for TypeScript, Express, which is arguably the most popular API or backend framework for Node.js. Um, Commander, which is used for building command line applications. Axios is a popular one for doing making API calls from your application. I've used, pretty much all of these that are in this popular list at one time or another, and they are pretty awesome. Moment is for dates. And anyway, what I will normally do is if I'm working on a brand new project and I don't yet know of a library for doing something that I want to accomplish, but assuming that someone has built a library for that, I'll come in here and search. So I'll search like at one point in in the last couple of years or however long it's been, I have searched to see if there are any packages available for converting Markdown. And so we searched for Markdown, and sure enough, there's a package called Markdown, and it says it's a sensible Markdown parser for JavaScript. But a couple of things that kind of stand out to me right away is that one, the latest version is 0.5, so it doesn't have a 1.0 release. And the last time it was updated was 9 years ago. So that's kind of a concern. It's like, well, this may be a great library. It may be the best library. I don't know. But if it hasn't been updated in a while, chances are it at least doesn't have like some of the security fixes that have been published, if there are any dependencies that it has, and it's likely not built with, say, modern JavaScript in mind, like async and await. So I can kind of rule this one out already. Is like I don't even want to look at that one because it's probably not going to be what I want. So here's one called Marked, Markdown parser built for speed. That sounds promising. The version is 4.0.18 and was last updated 3 days ago. So it's an active project, and that sounds great. And there's lots and lots more. Markdown to JSX if you're using React libraries. Here's the one that I've been using, and it was last published. Whoops, didn't mean to click on it. Last published 3 months ago, 2.1. My guess is at some point I, either was not aware of this library called Marked, or I looked at it and decided that, comparing the libraries together, that the Showdown library was a better fit for what I wanted to do. So I'm just going to go, because I'm already familiar with it, I'm going to go with Showdown. But you may want to take a look at the Marked library and see what you think. So Showdown, and it may have something to do with a license. So a lot of times I will pick a more permissive license like the MIT or BSD, just so that I know, I want the code that I publish as open source to be as freely available and accessible to as many folks as possible. And I like the more permissive licenses of, say, MIT. Okay, so I jumped over to the chat, and there's a couple of questions there. Question one, what do you all use for testing there at Pluralsight? Do you use Jest? That's a very good question. I'm not on I'm on the developer relations team. I'm not on the engineering team. I don't know what the engineering team uses, but that's a great question, and I know someone who would know the answer to that. I will find out because yeah, that makes me curious. I'll find out and get back to you on that. Um, Second question is, what would you recommend for Pluralsight software interviews? Well, um, mm, I don't know that this is the right place to ask that kind of question. We're doing a developer stream. I'd be glad to help you, but I'm not going to talk about career kind of stuff in this stream right now. That's not the priority of this content. Um, but if there are developer related questions specific to Node.js or the application that we're building, specific to the JavaScript community, I'd be glad to answer those. And Yama says, thanks for putting this together. Well, thank you for being here and being a part of this stream. All right, so we're talking about npm, Node.js, and trying to find the right package. I'm going to use Showdown. So the way that I need to incorporate this library into my application is use npm install and the name of the package. Modern versions of Node.js automatically add any dependencies that you have to your package JSON file so that you don't have to explicitly use the save switch. So npm install is all that's needed. So if we look at, we go back to the project and look at package.json, we see that our dependencies have been updated with Showdown. All right. So in my preload here, where I'm going to be doing the work of getting this external file and converting it from Markdown to HTML, I can bring in Showdown as a dependency using the require. And here, where I've got my function that takes in the Markdown and currently returns an empty string, I want to use the Showdown library to return the converted HTML. All right. So again, showing you basically how I would go about learning how to do this. Looking at the npm page for Showdown, sometimes you will find a short example of how to use the library. If not, then you may have to go jump to the project documentation. But here's a quick example. This one's for Node. So they are requiring in the Showdown package. They're creating a converter, a new Showdown converter, and then using converter.makeHTML to turn the Markdown into HTML. Cool. So here I'm going to create a converter. Let's see, new Showdown converter. Looks like converter takes a lot of options. I'm going to assume for now all we need are the defaults. And then we can return converter dot make HTML from the Markdown text. So hopefully, if this does what we expect it to do, when the application loads, it's going to, as soon as the window is loaded, so we're listening for the DOM content loaded event, just like we would if we were building a web app on the front end. And we're going to read the contents of the file, convert that markdown to HTML, and then find the element on the HTML page that is going to contain our script and replace the contents or the inner HTML of that div tag with the HTML that was created from the markdown. So I think we can try this out. If everything works right, then we should see this markdown, teleprompter script version 1, talking point 1, point 2, and so forth, converted to HTML and inside that window. So npm start, looky there. Let me hide these other windows so the contrast is better. And you should now see, let me move this out of the way. Should now see the script. So teleprompter script version 1, talking point 1, and I can use my mouse or my touchpad to scroll that script. If I bring this over into my teleprompt window that I'm I'm looking at the camera with, you can see that, well, you may be able to see that I have my script that's appearing right on top of the video on that screen, which then gets mirrored up here and gets displayed inside the teleprompt window. So if I was to, be presenting something to you right now, I could easily read my own script. It says teleprompter script version 1, talking point 1, idea 1, 2, and 3. And I can still be looking directly into the camera as I'm reading my script. Cool. That's exactly the kind of stuff we want to be able to do. Seems like yeah, it is there's some translucency to, or transparency to, the window. I can still see through the text, and I think it's kind of around where I want it to be. One of the features that we may want to add to this application at some point is the ability to override the style sheets that we're using. So, through documentation, be able to tell someone, hey, if you don't like the way this looks, if you want to use a different font, if you want to change the font sizes, if you want to change the colors of the fonts or the background, you could override the CSS using these commands. And here are some examples. So even someone who doesn't know CSS, you could at least give them some examples of how they could change a skin, so to speak, create their own theme. And maybe that's the thing too, is like, maybe you go take it another step further and give folks the ability to edit their own theme. So not edit CSS directly, but give them a UI that allows them to choose what font and colors and font size. That would be amazing, and that would be kind of what I would expect if I were to want to use a commercial teleprompt application. All right, so we've accomplished being able to read and parse Markdown. That didn't take as long as I thought it would, which is really cool and awesome. So, what can we work on next? We get started on next. I've got a list of features and things that I want to be able to do. Um, what if one thing that's common to most Electron applications that I have created is the ability to save and restore the state of the application. So right now, every time we launch the application, it if I launch it right now, it's always 800 by 600 and it's always centered on this screen. Um, but folks who use the application may want to resize the window. They want to maximize the resolution that they have on their teleprompter screen, so that they, are able to add more text on the screen, or maybe a user would like to have the teleprompter in one corner of the screen and not always come up in the center. So it would be nice to have the app remember the size of the window screen and the position of the screen, so that the next time you run the application, it's going to load that same and display in that same area and same dimensions. So that's, like I said, that's a really common thing to do with an Electron app or any desktop app, right? A desktop app that behaves well and creates a good user experience ought to have at least that kind of functionality. Um, so we can do that. We can get the position and the dimensions of the window at the time that the application is closed, and store that in a file that's part of the app itself, or the user's profile, the you know wherever the standard location is for storing app settings on a per login basis. Electron has that ability to store app specific, just like any desktop app would, um, and do it in a platform agnostic way so that it works the same if you're running on Mac or Linux or Windows. So um, there are some examples of how to do this in some of the Electron boilerplate frameworks. So if you're building a new Electron application yourself, for whatever purpose you have, personal or for your company, you may want to start with something like Electron boilerplate, or a boilerplate that's specific to, say, a front end technology that you're comfortable with, like React or Vue. And some of these boilerplates include code that saves the configuration state, or at least libraries that you can plug into. We're just going to create our own version of that, and we can do that using one of the lifecycle events of the application. So right now we have a lifecycle event of app.whenReady. So when the app is ready to run, we hook into that event to create the window that becomes our UI And we also register a channel for sending messages back and forth between the front end and the Node.js back end, so to speak, so that we can log messages to the console. But in here, we can also register some code to store the state of the application. So the first thing that I want to build is a way of storing the and retrieving the config file. Um, let's take a look at we can in this create window we can do some things like check for when dot on close, which is a close. When this window is closed, then we want to run a function that saves the state, the current state of that window. So let's just say let's just write a message to the console so that we know this is working. Okay. So come over here, run npm start. There's our code. I'm going to quit the app, and we got our message. The window was closed. So we know that event is working. Now let's save the state. I'm going to create a function in here that takes in the window that is closing. And instead of writing this to the console, I'm going to say await save state. Make this an async function. We also need to make this an async function. Or rather, this an async function. Good to have ESLint that can let you know if you've got some kind of issue in your code. All right, so in this save state, we can get some information off of the window using some functions that Electron provides. And again, I know just based on my experience of using Electron applications that there is a get position function on here. Let's log this to the console to make sure that it's working like it's supposed to. So got that. Let's close the window. And what was printed to the console is an array of two integers, -1360 and 139. So that's the position of the window. Now, I don't know off the top of my head what those numbers mean. You know, if the X and Y coordinates are the corner, you know, one of a specific corner of the window, and what kind of, you know, what are the grids that are used to determine that. But I'm fairly certain that if I take these numbers and then I plug them back in to the application when the application launches, that I should get the same position again. So let's run this again, and I'm going to move the window over here, close it, and now we get a different pair of numbers, 1905 and 58. So I'm guessing 58 is the Y position because I moved the window up, and the X position, 1905. Wherever 0 is, I don't know. Maybe because I have two monitors, the negative 1905 is like starting from the left edge of my primary monitor and goes negative this direction. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But I would bet that if I plug these numbers into creating that window, that we'll get the right position. So instead of, or we'll still say width and height, we can say X is going to be negative 1905 and Y is 58. Hopefully, the new window that we create here is going to be in the same position that we saw it just a moment ago. So, sure enough, there it is. So it positioned the window, instead of on the center of the screen, it positioned it in that area, that same spot. So what if I didn't know that these functions existed? Fair enough question. I'm guessing you may be wondering. The cool thing is Electron has some really good documentation. I haven't looked at it in a while, but let's check it out together. So if you go to electronjs.org, I think. No. Well, I was right. Electronjs.org. I just didn't have like the www or something in front of it. No matter. So if we look at the docs here, there's a quick start guide. There's all kinds of examples. There's best practices. There's a lot of good stuff in here to learn how to build an Electron application. Based on my experience, I'm just kind of defaulting what we're building so far to some of those best practices. Maybe might be worth going back and doing a refresher myself, but for now, I think we're okay. But let's look at the, let's see where we will find. Oh, so these are the docs, but what we want is up here where it says API. API is like our reference. So in our code, we're creating a browser window, and that's what we're working with when we're getting like the position of the window, the dimensions of the window, and setting those, saving those values and setting them back again. So we want to look at what are the properties and methods that are on the browser window. And there's lots and lots of great reference material here. So If you look here on the side, there's all these instance events. So you've got closed, which, I guess is, kind of splitting hairs on when, is it happening as it's being closed, or is it an event that's happened after the window is closed? Show, hide, maximize, unmaximize. There's lots and lots of events. There's even like move and moved. Those are great. We might could use those, like the move events, to go ahead and save the config. But I think just the one close event will be fine. We've got some static methods like get all windows, which not sure returns an array of all open browser windows. So if you have more than one window, you can get, it's a static method, so that makes sense. You can get everything. Instance properties, that's what we're looking for. So the contents of the window, different properties, whether it's minimizable or maximizable, is it full screenable, resizable, movable. Instance methods, we can change the focus. We can check to see if it's focused or destroyed. Is it visible? Is it a modal? We can use the maximize method to make it as big as the screen it's on. Minimize, restore. Those could come in handy. Get bounds. Let's see what that is. Bounds of the window as the object. I think that might be, no, that may be close to what we're looking for. I think it's get size. So get size returns the window's width and height. So in our code over here, we can call the get size method. And let's say position size. So now if we close our window and relaunch it, let's resize the window, close it, and now we get the position is still the same. We didn't change where the window is located on the screen, but the size is no longer 800 by 600. It's now 1146 by 643. So if we were to come here and say 1146 by 643, and run this again, we see that the window is exactly like it was when we closed it last. So here's the fun part. We need to get these dimensions, store them in the app settings, and then when the application launches, we need to read back those app settings and use those values to when we create the window. And if this is the first time that someone has run the application, then we need to default to centering the app on the screen and maybe using 800 by 600. All right, so save state. We've got the position and the size. Let's now take a look at how we would save that code. Um, let's see. The way I'm going to go about this is I'm going to create a new folder, call it utils, and inside utils, I'm going to create a new JavaScript file called state.js. Let me check to see if there are any questions. He almost says you may have to recode the LinkedIn app for them. It keeps crashing on me. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I do know that some folks have had issues with LinkedIn's streaming. Um, if it continues to frustrate you, the stream is also available on Twitch and YouTube. So if you have access to those, that may be a better alternative than watching the stream on LinkedIn. Okay, state manager. We're going to let's see. Let's create a so what I've got here so far is we're declaring module.exports, which is the way that Node.js, CommonJS inside Node uh, is exports an interface, if you will, for Node.js code. So when you're building your own modules inside Node and you want to use those modules in another place, you're going to require that in, and then whatever you configure as your module.exports, which could be a function, or it could be an object with properties, could be, a bunch of methods. All that is set up using module.exports. So in this case, we're going to expose from this module a function that basically creates an instance of this module with the default config and does whatever work it needs to load, like the initial state, and return the a method or a set of properties or a set of methods that the code that exists in the main can use. Now, we could do all this inside main.js, but main.js has already grown quite a bit and is about to the point where I would feel better refactoring main.js and start moving stuff into separate modules. So that's why we're taking this approach. There is on the Electron app, like if we go back to the documentation that we had earlier, the app exposes a lot of there's a lot of events, there's a lot of methods, there is a way to get the storage. User data. Okay, so app.getPath can be used to retrieve a bunch of different paths that are available to the application, such as home, which is the user's translates to the user's home directory, which could be, different depending on which operating system the application is running on. So if it's running on Mac, it's going to return, the Mac equivalent of the user home directory. On Windows, it could be, documents and settings kind of path. And then there's also app data, which is a per user application data directory, and user data, which, according to this documentation, is the directory for storing your app's configuration files, which may be, which by default is the app data directory appended to your app's name. So user data is what we want. That's as you can see, app data defaults to these values on the different operating systems. User data is where we want to store the configuration for the state for the application and any other config stuff we may want to store, such as the last file that someone loaded as their script. Maybe we want to, store a bunch of default settings as the application is used over time. I've been keeping these streams at about an hour, and we're almost at time. I'm going to save the rest of this state management code for the next stream, which will be next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific, or wherever it is that you may be in the world, evening, morning, afternoon. Are there any other questions that I can answer in the next couple of minutes before we wrap up today's session? Once again, I really appreciate all the folks that have joined. I am glad to see that getting a few more folks each week. So the word is getting out. Maybe some folks are returning from previous weeks. I sure hope so. I'd love to get your feedback on how I can do a better job of streaming these. I'm learning, and I hope you're learning too. Well, folks, I've enjoyed this past hour. If you do have any questions, please post them in the comments. You can also reach me, David Neal, David-Neal at pluralsight.com. Or you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, my website, reverendgeek.com. I am Reverend Geek most everywhere. You can see there's me, Reverend Geek. One way or another, you can get a hold of me through whatever platform of your choice. And thanks again for joining today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share these things with you. And if there's any feedback that you have for me on how I can improve, how I can help you with your tech journey, please let me know. Till next time, I hope you have a blessed rest of your day and week, and I'll see you again on All Hands on Tech Live, developer stream hosted by David Neal. See you again soon.